Welcome to More Than Miles, the podcast where we use storytelling and expert interviews to widen the lens on what it means to be a happy and healthy endurance athlete. We believe that athletes are so much more than their body, sport, and training miles. I'm Dr. Kate Mihevik-Edwards.
And I'm Dr. Casey Sinders. We are endurance athletes, physical therapists, and huge coffee addicts. We spend most of our time treating, educating, and working with endurance athletes. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Now let's get to the show.
Today, we have Abby Keenan as our guest. She is a certified mental performance consultant, and she co-owns Intrepid Performance with her husband, John, here in the Atlanta area. Abby was a competitive swimmer turned runner and has been working with competitive athletes for 10 plus years. She works with both the Atlanta Track Club and the Atlanta Triathlon Club, and she focuses on helping athletes to better utilize mental skills training in competition and during training.
We covered a lot of ground in this conversation, and we hit everything from Abby's love of running, or at least her start of running, how she started her business, and then, of course, all the hard-hitting things that I know you guys are really interested in, such as what to do when things don't go well during a race. I personally got some great race advice about how to deal with past negative experiences and strings of bad races. So this is a really good one. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did. Please enjoy Kate and I as we talk to Abby Keenan of Intrepid Performance. Hey, Abby, welcome to More Than Miles. We're so excited to have you to talk some mental skills training. Thanks for coming on the show, Abby.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's going to be a fun conversation, I'm sure. Great to see y'all.
Yeah, great to see you too. We were talking a little bit before this about how long it had been since we saw your face.
I know. Dang it, COVID. Come on.
I know, right?
I miss dancing goats and coffee and yeah.
Oh, dancing goats and coffee was definitely amazing. We used to do that every few months.
Yeah, I know. I need to get back down to Decatur.
Me too. All right, Debbie. So we're going to just jump in. So as you may or may not know, one of the questions that we love to ask our guests is, how did you get into running? Like, how did your love affair with running begin?
My love affair with running was not that way in the beginning. I would like to describe my beginning of running as pure hatred and a fixed mindset.
Oh boy.
Probably not a good place to begin, but
I love the honesty. This is really good.
Yeah, candor. That's what I'm about. I was a competitive swimmer for 12 years, and I had this idea in my head as a high school student athlete that swimmers were not runners. Every time they would kick us out to the park across the street for dry land, run, whatever, I was like back of the pack, just sucking wind and cursing under my breath the entire time. Like, it was not my thing. The start wasn't very good, but then I had some roommates in college. We went out to the botanical gardens. I went to the University of Georgia, and so they drugged me out there. At least that was my memory. And I actually fell in love with trails. I took a playlist along because I've always been a huge music buff. And so the combination of nature, running by a river, listening to music, I started to be okay with the idea of running. It just kind of started flourishing from there. I will say I was still very much clueless about what to do and how to run and what form was. And I really didn't know much of anything. The form and the kind of putting it together and being a bit more safe came together in grad school. I went to Florida State and lived in Tallahassee, which is where I met my now husband, who's been a competitive runner for over 20 something years now. And so he took my T-Rex form, as we liked to joke about it. You're a runner, you know what I mean? The T-Rex, man. I was that runner. Yeah.
Casey actually dresses up as a T-Rex in her running costume, so we're very aware of T-Rex running.
Yes, form. It's a very special running form. It takes a skill set unmatched by others.
So he helped a lot with just, getting me out of that and helping me to have proper form and technique. And we continued running trails and all of that there. And then I feel like I got better and faster and really started to enjoy it more and started racing more. And fast forward several years, we hopped from North Carolina to Atlanta, started doing Peachtree every year. Then I signed up for the Triple Peach, which for those of you who are in Atlanta and familiar with Atlanta Track Club, you know that that's Peachtree on July 4th, the 10K, the 10 miler in October, and then the half marathon at Thanksgiving. Well, The 10 miler was great until about mile 8.5. And then I basically limped the rest of the way to the finish line, which was god awful. I remember a volunteer asking me, "Are you okay? Do you need do you need help?" And I was like, "I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it." So I finally had to give in to the fact that I was injured. Something was wrong. I didn't know what it was, but I circled around and PT and figured out ultimately that I needed to have surgery. So I did. That was late 2017. I had a labral tear in my right hip and I had bursitis in my IT band. It was a really rough recovery. And that was pretty devastating because I couldn't do something that I had grown to really love as an adult. It took a lot out of me. And then now I have 2 young boys who are under age 3. So the next couple of years ended up being pregnancy and postpartum, which Kate knows nothing about when it comes to running.
No, nothing at all.
Nothing at all.
Yeah, Casey is actually the expert in pregnancy and postpartum.
Oh, there you go. So
our listeners know that's not true.
Oh, it's all right. That was just a roller coaster the whole time. So now that I am done with having kids, the 2 boys is going to be it. So now I get to write my next chapter and I'm really excited. It's going to be slow rolling. I know that, which is my hardest thing because every time I get even a quarter mile in, I'm like, oh my God, I love this feeling. And I just want to be running miles and miles again, but it's going to take me a bit. I just need to be patient and listen to my body more, which I am not very good at doing, but I'm going to attempt it.
So what are you telling yourself to help you pace yourself and take it slow?
Just that it's a process and it's okay. Like, I feel like I'm constantly trying to remind myself that it's okay to be where I am right now, even though it doesn't feel that way. I actually started seeing a pelvic floor physical therapist just to kind of make sure that I'm healing postpartum and that I'm doing this gradually. And I feel like having an expert tell me you need to be slow and it's okay to be gradually getting back into this. Hopefully that will help this time so I can be safe and gradually rebuild strength over time.
I think when we form expectations about things, we really can set ourselves up for failure sometimes. I know that's one of my issues with that I think I'm going to end up asking about later in the conversation. But Abby, so what actually got you into the psychology of sports? So where did your career come in?
Mostly because of the swimming, because running kind of came later, at least of my enjoyment of that. Thinking back on my 12-year competitive career, I like to describe myself as delightfully average. I was a good competitor, but I missed out on a lot because of the mental component. Looking back, I was really anxious or nervous before a lot of my races, before meets in general, really. And I didn't know how to calm myself down. I was in fact doing a lot of the wrong things that I often see athletes do now. And it just made me curious. What could I do about this? And how could I get better at the mental side of swimming? Because physically, I felt like in training, I could lead lanes and I could do everything my coach was asking me to do. And I could do the dry land strength type training. And so I just wanted to figure out what's missing, what's the disconnect, and stumbled upon sports psychology in college, doing a careers in psychology class, and was really curious because I had never heard of that as a discipline, something you could study. So ended up going to grad school to get my master's. The rest is kind of history, just getting to start working with athletes at Florida State, learning how do I do this work and how do I make an impact so that athletes didn't have to experience what I did, ultimately, just helping them to have more success, improved performance, but also to make them happier. If you love something so much and it's so painful and so stressful because you don't have the mental skills to navigate that, nobody should have to go through that.
What were the things that you were struggling with before a race, and how would you tell athletes now to deal with the things that you were struggling with?
I thought you needed to be really pumped up and activated before a race. Sometimes that is true, depending, especially for a lot of sprinters, whether that is in swimming or running in particular. But a lot of times that's not where your energy or activation needs to be. And so for me, what I didn't know is that I needed to be on the lower end of the spectrum and to use things like relaxation and self-talk to be able to navigate, okay, let's push to the other side of the continuum so that my performance can really shine through because I'm not so activated. full disclosure, that's not to say that nerves are always the bad thing, because they're really not. A lot of it comes down to our perception of those nerves, which is where self-talk really does play an important role in how we perceive what we're experiencing from a mental, cognitive level and what we're feeling from a physical or somatic level. So, that for me was the big thing, just not being able to navigate the physical and mental experience of anxiety or nerves before an event.
Tell us a little bit about your business and what you do with athletes.
I will say I didn't quite know what I wanted to do when I started it. I knew that I wanted to help people, and I knew that I wanted to come back to Atlanta. And so it really started with kind of a free for all. And maybe that's too transparent, but we started in 2015 here in Atlanta, and we have gotten a lot more defined since then, if you will. Originally, we just wanted to work with anyone and everyone who wanted to improve their performance and do it through mental skills training. And over time, we really took a look in the mirror and just said, like, well, who do we really want to work with and why? And where do we feel like we can make the most impact? And so that has led us to specialize more in running, swimming, and triathlon. And so what we do with clients like that, I look at the mental side of things. And the cool thing is most of my work is one-on-one. I do also like workshops, webinars, build curriculum. I adjunct for National University to supervise graduate students. So I do a lot of things under this umbrella, but I also and mainly work one-on-one with athletes. The two ages that we tend to work with most often are teen athletes, and then of course their parents or guardians in conjunction with that. And then also folks who are in their 30s and up. So what that looks like, really, we're trying to give them a guide, something that's easy to follow, that's customized, that's individualized. So think about, like, have either of y'all ever used Calm or Headspace?
All the time.
All the time. Same. Cool. So you think about, like, let's say you go into Calm and you pick a guided meditation that you're going to do for 10 minutes that day. So you can literally sit down, close your eyes, listen, and have this full experience. So imagine if you were trying to do that without any former knowledge of breathing, meditation, mindfulness, and you gave yourself 10 minutes and you set a timer with no app, no sense of what you're doing. You just heard that it's important. You're probably not going to get very far, right? Like
I tried that actually.
Did you? How did it go?
I'm not currently doing it, so if that tells you anything.
Okay. Well, that's kind of it, right? Is if you try to do something, just hearing that it's important, more than likely you're going to do it incorrectly, inconsistently, or not at all.
Yes.
And so similar to an app like that that's become very popularized, what we try to do is make mental skills easy. Not easy in the sense of snap your fingers, it's done, it's like magic, but easy in the sense of here's the step-by-step approach of how to do goal setting, of how to do relaxation strategies, of how to improve your self-talk, how to do imagery or mental rehearsal. And there's a why behind it, because that's what that athlete needs or wants based on the barriers or obstacles that are in their way for their performance. And so we take a very customized approach, much like y'all do as well, in the sense of who is this person and why are they sitting in front of me and what are they looking for and how can I support to help them achieve their version of success? What does that mean to them? And, and it also looks at, like, what have they already tried? Because most often we all have tried something, whether it has worked or not. And so we want to look at that and build on that to be able to then give them a sense of what are these mental skills? How do they apply to your training and competitive performance? Go out and practice them and then come back and let's reflect. How did it work? And what do we need to tweak? Or, man, that was a total crapshoot, so we're going to toss that one and then move to another skill. So it's really just looking at helping that person by being a guide or a facilitator to bringing my expertise in sports psychology and mental skills to help them, like we've said before, improve performance, fulfill their version of success, and be happier, enjoy what you're doing in your sport.
Yeah. I think we underestimate happy.
We do. I know I did for a very long time.
Yeah. Especially when we're trying to push for a goal. as goal setters, triathletes, runners, that's a really hard thing to realize, is that, oh, wait, this is supposed to be fun too. And if it's not, why am I doing it?
Yeah. And there are some aspects. So like if you look at a concept like deliberate practice, which many people may have heard as popularized by Malcolm Gladwell. However, the research is by Anders Ericsson, and it really looks at there is a component of deliberate practice that it should be inherently unenjoyable. So there are pieces of when you are supposed to not really enjoy it because you are so focused and so entrenched in that very intentional, effortful practice. But the big picture is that, yes, if we chose to do this, my goodness, let's enjoy it. When it comes to that race day, that competition, like let's have some fun and really be, find the gratitude in what we're able to do because we chose it and we put the work in.
I love that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the purpose and the why, right? Too, because I think when I first started running, the only reason, I liked it. Like, don't get me wrong, I wasn't miserable at cross country practice, but I think I was most addicted to the PRs, the achievements, the like hitting splits, like that kind of piece of it. And everything else just kind of fell by the wayside. And so as an adult, the longer you run, the harder those moments are to come by. And so I've gone through several just like, what am I doing here types of situations. And I think bringing it back to why am I doing this? What's the purpose? If you take away the race times and the goals and the finish lines, like what is running really about for me? That's something that has helped me personally. I did not read that anywhere.
It's so true. And I think you bring up a good point because I can't tell you how many runners and triathletes come with, I want a PR and I want to get on the podium and I don't want to be last out of the water. And all of these expectations, kind of circling back to what you brought up earlier, those are really challenging. And here's the thing, rubber meets the road. The outcome matters. And that's okay that the outcome matters. And also the process has to matter just as much, if not more. And I think that's where we miss the boat and where the enjoyment kind of gets sucked out of the equation a lot of the time because we're so focused on that outcome that is not really in our control, and so it's important for us to kind of take a step back and say, what do I control that's a part of the process that helps me to really enjoy what I'm doing and finding that deeper purpose or that intrinsic motivation? Because to your point, Casey, that's going to help all of us to stay in a sport that we love for a lot longer and help us to have that longevity and finding that enjoyment over time.
Yeah. So like besides, I imagine this is a theme that you see in like terms of trying to find the joy and find the fun within a lot of these sports. What are some other themes that come up often for you when you're working with athletes?
Coming back to what I had mentioned about my own issue, if you will, this one comes up a lot too. And I think, to Kate's point, I do, as much as reflecting back on those moments in high school, for me, it's not good, or college even too, but mostly high school, having that anxiety and those nerves, it can be really debilitating. And so that I would say is one of the biggest things that I see athletes come to me for. And I feel like it's only gotten heightened because of the COVID pandemic. Take runners or triathletes, whether it's a particular course that, everybody talks about, man, that is just the hardest bike, or man, that run is just awful because it's so hot and humid. Or for a lot of triathletes, especially older triathletes, I find that the open water swim can be a real anxiety producer, especially if they didn't swim growing up and they really feel like they quote unquote started late. Or a particular distance, like somebody who's going after their first marathon or their first ultra or their first Ironman. A lot of that can be very nerve-wracking for folks. And I find that most often the nerves and anxiety tend to hit pre-race, and that pre-race can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So it could be literally immediately before you're going to toe the line or get in the water, or it could be days leading up or possibly even longer. And so looking at helping folks to navigate that anxiety and the nerves, that's a huge piece that typically happens. I would say another big one too is there is a recent or a string of poor performances. Mm-hmm. And so either something just happened that now it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. That's never happened to me before. I need help. or it's been something that, race after race after race has gone wrong, or sometimes it's even years of races have gone wrong and they've just been meaning to reach out. And now it's finally gotten so bad that they really feel like they can't move forward without some additional support. So I would say those are a couple of other ones that tend to be heavy hitters as far as, struggles or barriers that people come to me for. And I do want to mention too, you don't have to be bad to get better. And so while I think we focus so much on the barriers or the struggles that people have, and it's a pain point, let's be honest. As soon as you experience that pain, whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, whatever the pain is, that often is the impetus to seek additional support, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so while, yes, I would say most of my clients have something that they want to quote unquote fix or improve, it is great. And I know y'all agree with me. I'm going to be like preaching to the choir here. Prevention is awesome. So if you are just looking to get better, that's excellent. Let's do it. This is something that you can build skills around to just have more mental strength. No matter what you do. And so you don't have to be bad to get better.
That's my favorite quote, and I'm stealing it.
A colleague of mine said it. I can't remember who, but it's so true, right?
Yeah, I'm totally stealing it because it is absolutely right in so many ways. And we forget that. And I think, especially now with everything that's been going on in the world, and, I don't know if we can say post-pandemic because it's still going on, but all these people keep saying post-pandemic, and it's actually, we're still here. Yep. But I think that we have been in this state of anxiety and heightened emotion for so long that we forget that we're there and we're not cutting ourselves slack anymore, and we're pushing harder. And this could go off the deep end. I won't keep going because this could be like a 2-hour conversation, but your idea of you don't have to be bad to get better, I think might even speak to people that don't realize they're in trouble, or don't realize that they could be better than where they are.
If you boil down what we do with mental skills training, it is essentially helping athletes and people to create self-awareness, which is really what you're talking about, of helping them to understand themselves and understand, to Casey's point, their intrinsic motivators or extrinsic motivators, their values. What do you really care about? Why do you have these goals? And where do you fall on? It could be anything related to your sport, your physical ability, like your strength, your technical ability, like your form, your technique, and how do you do that, based on if you're a sprinter, mid, or your distance or ultra or something like that. Your tactical, how is your strategy? And your mental, of course, like we're talking about now. So a lot of people don't take the time or don't have the skill set to be able to really pause and take a look at that self-awareness to understand themselves better. So from there, once we've helped somebody to develop a bit more awareness of where they are, that opens up a lot of doors to the regulation piece. And so then based on what we know about you and where you are now and what your strengths and areas of opportunity are and what you've learned about yourself, how do we get better? And how do we do that through mental skills and, for my lens, to be able to build different skill sets so that you can fall back on those in training and in competing. That's what it boils down to, right? It's the awareness to regulation.
Well, I was going to bring this up a little bit later, but since you kind of already brought it up as one of your common themes,
go for it.
This is a question that I believe I've asked you before, but as I head into a new marathon cycle and I have had a string of negative experiences, bad races, it's been a while since one has gone well. And so I would be very appreciative if you can share some of those strategies with us, and particularly me.
Well, I think the first thing is you're not alone. It happens to a lot of people. It happens to a lot of people right now. Kind of looking at the lens of the bigger picture of what we're living through with the pandemic, that's happening to a lot of people I can't pretend to know every reason, but there's a lot of them. We haven't had as many opportunities to race. We've had so much uncertainty and uncontrollables going on in our lives right now. And that's put a lot of stress on us. I know one of the things Coach Carl loves to say is stress, right? And that is so true in this instance as well. And so recognize, I think, first and foremost, that it's normal, that it's not just you. And that in and of itself can be really powerful, because so much of the time, I know I've felt this way before when I have a string of bad performances. I think it's just me. And it feels kind of like that spotlight is pointed directly at you, and like everybody knows that it's just not going well. And that can have, a negative effect on us, because then that impacts our self-talk around what is going on with us that's causing that to happen. So I think that would be the first thing. And then the second is I would look at each particular performance and try to dissect, what were your expectations, your goals going in? What was your motivation, kind of like we've been talking about already? And then let's tease apart what happened. What was actually good in that performance versus what was actually bad? And what's to say it was bad? Like, what about it was bad? Was it actually bad? And if you think of like a Likert scale, 1 to 10, 1 being, just moderately annoying to 10 being catastrophic. Okay, how would you rate that performance, and what might go into that rating? So helping yourself to get what we're looking for is qualitative information. So some kind of like your story behind that experience, and then some quantitative, of course, it's self-report. So it's, it's up to interpretation, but how would you quantify that? What number would you give that? And so going about that reflection process, again, that's going to create the self-awareness of what actually happened. And sometimes what I find that's so interesting about that process is it really wasn't as bad as we thought, or it was different than we thought. Now, I will say, and Casey, this is not to pick on you, and sharing this with me now, I didn't know, but preferably we are reflecting 24 hours or less after a performance, no matter if it was a good performance or a bad performance, because we're going to get a much more accurate interpretation of what happened versus waiting even a few days. But a lot of times we don't reflect until the end of the season. And then it's like trying to remember all these details, and it's super fuzzy. And so we want to be as accurate and objective, but also kind of get into what was our perspective and why about those moments. So I don't have what do you do about it, because it depends. And I know that's like the total cop-out answer, but it does. It really depends, because once we have all of that information, then we can do something with it. A lot of times it might be something about maybe you didn't sleep well the night before or the week before, and so we can regulate that. Maybe it's a nutrition, hydration, preparation thing, which is not necessarily me. Then we can go see some other folks who are qualified to do that. Maybe it's some huge stressful account happened in the midst of your training cycle, or right before that race, or during the race. So there's a number of things that could go wrong. Maybe it's you didn't feel as confident because you've had the string of bad races, and that keeps, just kind of building on each experience, if you will, and shielding you from what the opportunity is. So all that to be said, I don't know, because I don't know the story, and I don't know the number you give all of these. But hopefully that could give you some opportunities to reflect, and then perhaps have some ahas into, oh, interesting. Maybe these are some things that I could tweak and adjust, or get some additional support from, different people to be able to then round out how you approach your next race.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a fantastic answer. I know that there is no answer unless we were to really talk about this one-on-one, which
we can.
We can, right? Like, I might hook you up for that, or I might hook you up for that. But that's what what is classified as bad is what I really remember from the last time I asked this question. And I think a lot of it too just has to do with presence, right? Like this faith that just because things didn't go well in the past doesn't really reflect on what can happen this time around. And I think that can be sometimes a hard thing to shake, but it's true.
And that's so much easier said than done. I think you bring up a great point. Like ideally, I don't know if y'all are Ted Lasso fans, maybe.
Yeah.
Yes. best show on television right now for sure.
So good.
But if you watch season 1, Ted Lasso, the coach, talks to Sam, one of the soccer or football players, excuse me, about being a goldfish, because goldfish have really short memories. So he's just like, be a goldfish. And it would be great if we could all be a goldfish instantaneously. Like if something bad happens or we have a bad race, we could just shut it off and move on, but it doesn't work that way. And so that's where a lot of the times the reflection can play such a massive role in being able to process what happened, good and bad, and then allow us that space to respond differently and have a better plan in the future, therefore letting go of what has happened that we're kind of holding on to emotionally, if you will.
I think that's great. And it depends is my favorite answer of all time. And
don't worry, Abby, we say it all the time.
Yeah, we say it too. So it makes complete sense to us.
Normalizing. I think that's wonderful.
That's right. So you've talked a little bit about anxiety before a race. We've talked about expectations after a race not being met and whether it's a good race or a bad race. But what about in the middle of a race? So what happens when an athlete is in the middle of the race and something happens, obviously out of their control, or maybe not obviously, but that happens all the time. Things show up that you don't expect. What kind of tools or tips can you give athletes to say, okay, if something happens in the race that you're not expecting, here are some things that you can reach into your pocket for, or your toolbox, to help you out and get you through the race?
I would say 2 different approaches. One is a preparation approach and one is an execution approach. The preparation, if at all possible, I encourage everyone, if you're an athlete, particularly the athletes that we all serve, think about the if then ahead of time. So think about what could possibly go wrong, which I know is a little scary to think about, but we all have those typical things, right? Like in a triathlon, maybe you get into a really crowded space in the swim and you get elbowed in the face or something. Pretty common. Maybe on the bike, you get a flat. Maybe something happens on the run where you're just really hot and you are overheated. So think about the common things that we all hear, or the question I like to ask is, what are you most afraid of? Because that's going to be a big indicator of what is the crazy moment that you might be really nervous about or really afraid of, and let's plan for that. And so taking some intentional time, again, awareness to regulation, looking at what are those things? Let me make my hit list, if you will, of if this goes wrong, that's going to be a pretty sour moment for me. And then let's plan for it. So if X happens, then this happens. And so this really comes back to research about mental contrasting from Gabrielle Ettingen. It's called mental contrasting with implementation intentions. And so looking at what is your wish or goal? What is the best outcome if that were to happen? What are the internal obstacles that I face? And then if that obstacle occurs, what's my plan? And so if we go back to a framework like that, that allows us to have that space to plan for those particular moments. And what that does is it helps us to feel more prepared, which increases our confidence, and it helps us to respond in the moment instead of react in the moment. Because what you're talking about is if it's unexpected, unplanned, insane, you're going to quickly react, and it's probably not going to be very pretty. But if you've taken the intentional time we've all had that moment, right? And we're human. It's going to happen. You can't possibly come up with every single worst case scenario, but do yourself a favor and plan ahead of time to come up with those possibilities. Because even if that exact thing doesn't happen, now you have come up with your coping mechanisms for similar moments, right? And so as soon as those things occur, then you have a better response for them. So that's kind of the preparation piece. The execution piece is, okay, now if one of those things happens, you know what to do and you can do it. You may not do it beautifully. It still may be a little choppy, but at least you've thought through it enough to have the wherewithal to kind of pull from your memory. Oh, wait, hold on. I thought about this. Now I can do something. So that's one piece of it. But the other piece is if you haven't come across it, you didn't think about it, try to pause if you can. And sometimes that is a full stop physical pause. Like, let's say, for example, you're doing a try. This could be during your transition if you wanted, or if it's you need to pause and get off your bike for a second. Not the worst thing in the world. Now, if that's not you, that's okay. You can still do a mental pause and think about, okay, let me take a couple deep breaths, because that's going to calm my sympathetic nervous system down a bit, to open up my mind, to give myself some moments of mental clarity so I can think through this strategically and logically. And then what would my best version of myself do right now? Or what would my coach tell me to do right now? Or what would, pick a favorite person in your life who knows something about your performance and what you're actually doing. What would they tell me to do right now? Or how would I like to respond right now?
That's a good one.
Which is a really hard question, right?
It's a really hard question.
It's a really hard question. But the cool thing is you can prepare for that in your training. So if you think about, okay, we're all going to experience adversity in training too, especially if you're training anything endurance, you're going to hit some bumps in the road, literally and figuratively. So building that into your training, pausing physically or mentally during your training when something comes up, and practicing that pause, practice that thought process. If you're the type of person that needs a reminder, that's okay too. This could be in a bag along the course. This could be on your hand. You're writing the acronym WIN, what's important now. And you take a quick glance at that to jog your memory of that question of, okay, what is important right now? Is it important that I have a total freak out moment and I'm going to just completely internally combust? No, that's not important right now. But what is important that's within my control to keep moving forward?
Love that. What's important?
I love that too. I have a lot of motivational jewelry. So like I have a bracelet that says perseverance, and then my ring here says be brave, to remind myself to be brave every day, which I don't always do, but it's there.
That's just it. We're human, right? So Casey, I love those examples because that gives us that very intentional visual reminder to jog our memory of, oh, right, that's important to me. And that's how I want to be. And that's a part of my value system. And that helps us to realign as a part of that response rather quickly.
I wish people could see this, because I feel like Kate and I have just been nodding this entire conversation. It's been really great.
These are things that all of us go through. It's real. And I think that's one thing that's really important to me, is to keep it real, as cliche as that sounds, because we're people. We're going to make mistakes. We're not always going to be perfect. But how can we use things like mental skills to help us navigate those moments a bit more effectively?
And I just keep thinking about how all of these mental skills that we use in sports are so applicable to daily life, and how well prepared as athletes we are if we understand this for life. All the situations that we face in life, whether they're, becoming a new parent, which we talked about earlier, or a parent of two now for you, or life changes, your job, or you're moving, or whatever it is. And all these skills that we learn as athletes are so applicable everywhere else. And I think sometimes we forget how important they are.
It's hard because I think we get so siloed into the athletic identity sometimes, but you're 100% right. And that's one of the things that I try to pull athletes out of that and say, how would this apply to school? How would this apply to applying for college or interviewing for a job? How would this apply to this, mysterious work-life balance that I don't think actually exists? But how do we navigate our lives as people with competing priorities and all kinds of things going on for us? And you're right, being now a parent of two, man, so many of these skills come into play. And I don't know that I would get through it without breathing and controllables and self-talk and self-care. And there's so much of it that you're right is very applicable. And I feel fortunate that I get to work in the context of sport, but I see it as working with people. Actually, really, and this is going to sound kind of strange, I don't love sport, but I love helping people figure out something that they love, helping them to get better at what they love. Sometimes it's finding that joy again because it's been lost because of all these barriers and obstacles and stress and life that gets in the way.
I take quite a bit of time in the morning to do my self-care and my breathing and my meditation. So much so that my patients have been starting later and later the older I get. And it's not because I'm still up in the morning, but I swear my patients think I sleep in really late now, but it's because I take this big chunk in the morning for all the self-care, because otherwise I don't feel like I can show up for my people if I don't show up for myself first.
Unpopular opinion, I don't take morning clients.
I know people don't like it, but
they don't, but I completely agree with you. I can't do it. Not only is that just not my thing. I'm not a morning person. So I definitely don't do my best work in the morning, but it's also the self-care in the morning is important. Our boys typically get up in the 8 o'clock hour, which we're very grateful for. Any parent of young kids, please don't judge me because I know that that's unheard of. However,
it's unheard of. Mine was 5 a.m. forever.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't fly because I literally wouldn't be here talking to you right now because I would be dead. Like that doesn't happen in my house. So, but the thing is, my husband and I now get up at 7 and we alternate days where one of us gets to go out to the park at the end of our street and get a run in or get a walk in or something. And just having that intentional time in the morning is so important. And figuring that out as a part of your routine. I wish I had more time. I wish I could do more extensively the things that you're doing. But even if you don't have a lot of time, I'm living proof that it is possible to set aside a bit of time for yourself to center and to do those things that are going to make you feel like you and make you feel alive and ready to conquer your day.
Right. And for everybody, it's different, right? For me, I just need a lot of time. And some people need 5 minutes or 10 minutes to center themselves and get themselves ready. I think that we all figure it out as we go along and as our story progresses, and we really learn more about ourselves with age.
Yeah, I didn't need any time or didn't think I needed any time in my 20s.
Oh, yeah. I know I did, but I certainly thought I was invincible. I started working out at 5 a.m. and didn't shut down till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock.
My life has changed.
I love how Casey's smiling quietly.
I'm still a youngin' over here. I still have boundless energy, and someone's got to see those morning clients, and it's going to be me.
Enjoy it. Have some fun for us.
I'm just kidding. I'm really, really tired. So something we wanted to do new here this is our season 2 of the podcast, is to wrap up with the same 3 questions. These are all going to come actually really nicely on the heels of the long conversation we just had, because they all are kind of geared towards how you take care of yourself. So the first thing we want to know is, what is the thing you do regularly to take care of yourself?
So I am working on this. 2 things, walking and listening to music. Hopefully that walking will convert to running soon enough as I gain more strength and endurance.
Love a good walk.
What is bringing you joy right now?
Similarly, I would say finding time for myself, which is not what I have always done. And as we were talking about before the podcast, working with a therapist definitely helps because it helps you to recenter that that's important and provide you additional strategies. So when I can really set aside, it doesn't have to be much, 10, 20 minutes at times. When I set aside time for myself, I feel a lot of joy and gratitude, no matter what it is that I choose to do with that time. It could be even really simple, just like lighting a candle of a fall fragrance, because fall is by far the best season. And all of the scents of fall are incredible. So could be something as simple as that. But just when I choose to take time for myself, that brings me a lot of joy.
What is your kryptonite? So one thing you love so much, you just have to have it in your life at all times.
I guess coffee. If I don't have coffee, I am not a very friendly person. So I would say, yes, I really do need a nice, it doesn't have to be even a very large cup, but just having a nice cup of coffee in the morning just does wonders. Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah,
okay,
I think cool. Kate and I would answer that. It might not take a long pause for us to say coffee, but
I would have answered it for you. What is Casey's kryptonite? Coffee.
Coffee.
Well, Abby, this was incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thanks for having me. Great to see y'all.
Yeah, it's been fun. Too. Let's talk again soon.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that it resonated with you and that you learned something. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps increase our visibility within the platform so that more awesome people like you can find us.
If you'd like to support us further, pretty please, you can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/morethanmiles. That's www.patreon.com/morethanmiles. Or for a few dollars, you can help the show grow and keep going, as well as receive exclusive perks like monthly Q&As with us. Until next time, remember to run the mile you're in, and that training is so much more than miles.